Hello everyone. Today I will share with you the process of making my Violet Evergarden cosplay. Step 1. The cravat. I cut a 17 centimeters wide strip of white fabric. On the internet they advised a strip to be 106 centimeters long, but I could only cut a 87 centimeters long strip. It did turn out to be enough. I then fold over the edges twice, by half a centimeters. And finish off both ends with some English embroidery. And the piece is finished. Step 2. The brooch. I first make the brooch out of clay, then paint it. I try to make the gem look like in the show when it's shown up close, but it looks more like a one-eyed monster than a gem. I then attached a piece of embroidery floss, painted the edges gold, and added a closure, and the piece is finished. Step 3. The boots. First I had to make the pattern. I did this by wrapping my leg in paper and using the best half as my pattern. I then use this pattern to cut 4 pieces out of forks leather. I sew the 2 halves together, fold over the top edge and top stitch it down, then cut off the excess at the front. I added a piece at the bottom so it could wrap around my shoe. I top stitch the back seam for a nice finish, and to help the boot take the right shape, I then add 24 hooks and 24 eyelets. Only on the top part of the boot. I added felt at the back of the eyelet holes, for strength and to not damage the leather. I then tried the boot on with the shoelace, and mark and cut the bottom piece, to follow the front line of the boot. I add 20 eyelets on the bottom piece. I stitched 2 flaps to hide the gaps created when tying the boots. I finished it off with an elastic at the bottom, so it didn't slide up, and the piece is finished. Step 4. The jacket. Using the cover garment pattern from this Birder magazine, I cut out my pieces. Following the instructions, I start by placing in the darts, for both the front pieces and the back piece. Then I sew the shoulder and side seams. After that I assemble the collar, and sew it to the jacket. I had a really hard time putting it together, and it didn't make much sense to me. The under collar was 1 piece and the top collar was like 3. After assembling the top collar, I first attached the under collar to the jacket, then the top collar to the under collar, and finally the top collar to the jacket. I then whip stitch the bottom edge. I made the sleeve pattern using a normal sleeve from a Birder magazine and adding parts on the side. I then cut it in half to have front and back. I don't know if it's gonna work, but we'll see. I cut all my pieces for the top half of the sleeve, then sew the back seam and hem the edge. I sewed about 6 centimeters at the top and bottom of the front seam. I then cut out a rectangle for the bottom half, hem the bottom, sew it closed, and hem the raw edges. I had to add a triangle at the top, or I couldn't fold my arms. I then sew both halves together and hem the raw edges. The top half was slightly pleated, so it could fit in the bottom half. I added a golden trim at the opening, in the top half of the sleeve. Using more of that gold trim, I make 2 small bows that I sew at the seam joining the 2 halves. I then sew the sleeves to the jacket and hem all the leftover raw edges inside. All the raw edges had to be hemmed, or there would be small blue threads everywhere. I sewed 2 buttons on the collar. This fancy one I found in my mom's button bag, and this teapot that I painted gold and sewed upside down, so it would look like the Auto Memories doll pin. I then made this circle out of clay and painted it gold. I cut a strip out of the fork's leather. I sew one end to the right shoulder, then attach the circle, then sewed the strap to the side seam of the jacket. I covered this button with gold fabric, painted this pin thing gold, attached it to the strap and the button to the jacket to form the closure. And the piece is finished. Step 5. The dress. I made a pattern for the dress. It's a half circle skirt plus a large shirt, but my dumbass made the dress 17 centimeters too long, and the shirt might be too large. I first cut out the back piece, then pleated fabric for the front piece. A total of 12 pleats. I secure the pleats using really small stitches. Then I assemble the pieces. First at the shoulders, I added a trim at the neckline. That is lower in the back than in the front, don't ask. Then one side, from under the armpit, to the bottom of the dress. And then, the other side, with a gap in the middle for a zipper. I then pleat more fabric, 21 pleats per sleeve to be exact, which brings us to a total of 54 pleats and 108 stitches just for the pleats, and cut the sleeves out of the pleated fabric. I close the sleeves. The sleeve pattern was the same as the one for the jacket, but the armholes on the dress weren't the same size, so I had to adjust them. Finally I sew the sleeves to the dress, gather them at the bottom, and finish the edge. I then covered the armhole seam with a piece of trim to hide the raw edge. I took the sides in by 5 centimeters. I cut the pieces out of the brown lining. I sew the two halves together. I stitch it to the bottom of the dress, good side to good side. Then flip it, and align the openings for the zipper. I sew in the zipper, and finish it by attaching the lining to the front, where the pleats are, and to the back with tiny stitches. I then tried to fold the back, but couldn't do anything that looked good. This is because my original idea doesn't actually work. But I had done so much work I didn't want to remake the dress, and it would be hard to cut up and salvage. So I took a 2-year break to think about it. What I ended up doing, use what I had made as a base. I joined the two side edges at the back and sewed them together. Then I bought more white fabric and brown lining and created an extra piece that were the gathers. It doesn't look that good, but it's the best I could do. I also made a bum pad to add extra volume. In conclusion, after wearing it twice, I think I did a pretty good job. I still think the back could be better, but looking online, no one shows the back of their Violet cosplays, so I guess I'm not the only one.